girlfriend of a Boston police officer whose body was found
in the murder trial of Karen Read after the jury said it was unable to
they
reach
will
a
retry
verdict.
Karen Read
is
after a
accused
judge declared
Alternates, today was day 6 of the Karen Read retrial, and it was a long day. Hopefully, you are all caught up from day 1 through day 5. All right. This morning, testimony picked up with the prosecutor's digital forensics expert, Ian Whiffen from Cellebrite. So it's Cellebrite, I don't know. Ian Whiffen's testimony provided insights into the digital evidence central to this case. While he supported the prosecution's timeline, the defense raised questions about the reliability and interpretation of this data. The cross-examination highlighted the complexities of digital forensics in legal proceedings. His cross-examination was conducted by defense attorney Robert Alessi, and it took most of the day. The cross-examination focused on the timing and integrity of the controversial Google search made by witness Jennifer McCabe, which we will all actually hear from later today, so make sure you listen to this entire episode. Much of the cross-examination also focused on the location and temperature data from the victim, John O'Keefe's cell phone. So here are some key points from Ian Whiffen's testimony. First, let's talk about the timing of Jennifer McCabe's infamous Google search. A central issue in this case is Jen McCabe's search for Haas Long to Die in the Cold on January 29, 2022. Whiffen testified that the search on Jen's phone browser occurred at 6:23 a.m. after John O'Keefe's body was discovered. However, today, during cross-examination, the defense highlighted a 2:27 a.m. timestamp associated with the browser tab, suggesting perhaps that Jen McCabe somehow conducted this Haas Long to Die in the Cold search way before John's body was ever found. But Whiffen was able to explain that 2:27 a.m. timestamp indicated when that specific browser tab was opened, not when the search was actually conducted. He also noted that Cellebrite removed this timestamp from its software to prevent confusion in the future. Apparently, not only had this case come up, but Cellebrite had a complaint about this same issue from an independent user. So, real briefly, you have a cell phone. I personally have an iPhone. On the Safari browser on my iPhone, I have, if you can believe this, over 300 tabs open. I know. Did you actually scuff? Because I do. And you know what? I learned that the maximum browsers that you can have open is 500. And at one point, I learned that you can only have 500 tabs open at a time, because at one point I did have 500 tabs open at a time. Anyway, what Ian explained during direct examination is that when you open a new tab on the phone's browser, a timestamp is created. And if you just continue to do different searches on that same tab, basically it doesn't matter if it's the same day or the following week, the timestamp that shows up in the digital fingerprint is the time that the tab was first opened, which is insane, right? How accurate can that be? So picture this. I open a new tab on April 1st and I look up a beef stew recipe. I close the browser, but I don't actually X out of that tab. 2 weeks later, on April 15th, I open Safari, and using the same tab, I now search how to get away with murder. If you were to pull up my digital fingerprint on my iPhone, you would see my how to get away with murder search timestamped on April 1st, even though I actually didn't conduct that search until April 15th. I mean, once Whiffen explained this on the stand, it made complete sense, although it really didn't. But the prosecution took it a step further, and they actually had the expert do an actual live demonstration of what this search glitch looks like in real time and how the system tracks it, basically to clear any confusion that a layperson might have with regards to Jen McCabe's search. Crazy, right? I thought that this was really good as a juror to see in real time. And guess what? As I stated earlier, after this was all said and done, Cellebrite realized that this was an issue with how they pulled digital fingerprints, and they revamped the entire software to basically fix this glitch. Oh, crazy. Putting that behind them, the defense moved on with a different issue. With regards to analyzing Jen McCabe's phone, the defense tried to add doubt in the data that the expert received to begin with. Specifically, the defense questioned the authenticity of the search data, pointing out that the hash value, which is a digital fingerprint used to verify data integrity, in this particular case, was unsigned. Whiffen acknowledged this, but stated that there was no evidence of tampering. He emphasized that multiple data points aligned consistently, indicating that the data had not been altered. Next up was the issue of John O'Keefe's cell phone out in front of 34 Fairview. Whiffen analyzed location data from John's phone, which the prosecution used to argue that John's phone remained near that flagpole outside of 34 Fairview Road throughout the night, and that he never entered the home. The defense, however, they challenged this argument, presenting a map showing that John's phone location radius actually included the house, suggesting perhaps that John's phone could have been inside of 34 Fairview. At this point, the defense got a huge win when Whiffen conceded that due to low accuracy in the data, the phone could have actually been inside the house. Then came the evidence regarding the temperature of John's phone battery. And let me just say that I learned that an iPhone doesn't actually have a way to measure temperature. It's the temperature of the battery that can at some point be ascertained. During cross-examination, the defense got Whiffen to discuss a few independent tests that he himself conducted with a cell phone and temperatures. He conducted one test using a cell phone and a freezer, where the battery dropped 50 degrees in 15 minutes. There was another test with a phone and freezing temperatures outside, where the battery in that test dropped 30 degrees in 13 minutes. Then the defense compared this test to the actual analysis of John's phone battery, where it actually dropped 22 degrees in an hour time frame. They were trying to get at how drastically different John's scenario was from the test. The prosecution, however, was able to gather additional information about the test from the expert, such as the fact that the experiment did not include wrapping the phone with a blanket, perhaps. Basically, the prosecution is arguing that John's body was laying on the phone in the snow, which kept it warmer than it would have been had it just been laying on the snow. There were a lot of objections during this line of questioning, and the prosecution could not figure out how to basically have the expert admit on the stand that a body laying on the phone outside could alter the temperature of the battery. But I think that eventually the jury probably got the point, despite all the objections. Anyway, this testimony was long. But the highlight of day 6 was when Jen McCabe herself took the stand. Jen McCabe is a longtime friend of John. She's 49 years old and the mom of 4 daughters. She's married and a former teacher turned stay-at-home mom who often coached her kids through various sports. Jen met John when he would show up to support his niece and nephew when he was simply just Uncle John. But they grew close when John became Guardian John. Jen's daughter and John's niece were in school together, so Jen would often help out with Kaylee, and there was another friend, Carrie Roberts, who often took John's nephew, Patrick. Now, we met Carrie Roberts on day 1 and 2 of trial. So just to be clear, Jen and Carrie didn't actually know each other before this time frame when this happened, except for one time about a decade ago when the kids were little and John took them both to get sneakers for the kids, and then he took them all out to lunch. Jen McCabe met Karen Reed back in July of 2020 when John started bringing her around, and Jen really liked Karen. Karen and her clicked because they both had MS, and Jen said on the stand that it was nice to meet someone her age going through the same exact thing. So bringing her attention to the night before John's death, Jen explained that her kids had played sports that night and she returned home from one of her daughter's games. Nicole Albert is Jen's sister, and Nicole had reached out to Jen to let her know that they were heading to the waterfall to celebrate Brian Albert Jr.'s birthday. Brian Albert Jr. is Jen's nephew. Jen and her husband Matt arrived at the waterfall at about 9 p.m. There, she saw Chris and Julie Albert, her niece Caitlin Albert, and her boyfriend, who is now her fiance Tristan, and her sister Nicole Albert. Brian Albert and Brian Higgins arrived later. Jen also said that she wasn't friends with Higgins, that he was basically just Brian Albert's friend. So Jen recalled that on that night, she had 2 or 3 drinks. John and Karen arrived to the waterfall close to 11 p.m., and at this point, the prosecution showed waterfall footage of John and Karen arriving at the bar. They're walking towards the table, there's a few hugs, and Jen McCabe is actually seen clapping because she says she was happy to see the couple. 30 minutes later, there is another video of Jen and Karen hugging, which presumably they introduced to show that there were no hard feelings between Jen and Karen and that they were actually friends. Then the prosecution showed another video. This video was time-stamped 15 minutes before midnight, and it showed another video of the table doing shots. Now, Jen testified that she wasn't there when they were doing shots. She was in the bathroom and exiting as everyone was taking their shots. And in this video, clear as day, you can see Karen Read taking a shot. Now, the question is, was this her fourth or her ninth drink? I mean, who knows? Because at this point, the jury has seen that she has told different versions of the story. How many drinks did she have? But listen, let's move on. At around midnight, as everyone was fixing to leave, Karen said that she wanted to go to Chris's pizzeria/sub shop that was up the road. Apparently, they had done that before, but on this occasion, the plan was to go back to Brian Albert's house to celebrate Brian Jr.'s 23rd birthday. Jen describes leaving with her husband, and I think she checked to see if Karen wanted to ride with them, but Karen declined. Matt McCabe was the one driving, and Jen was in the passenger seat. On the drive, Jen got a message from John asking where to, and she told him the address. John had never been to Brian Albert's house before. And then there is a brief call between Jen and John, and she tells John that it's close to Bella's mom's house. And honestly, this mysterious Bella's mom is crushing my soul. Anyway, the drive from the waterfall to the Albert home is roughly 5 to 8 minutes, according to Jen McCabe. When the McCabes arrive at 34 Fairview, there are a few cars in the driveway and a Jeep parked nearby. Inside, Jen described seeing her niece Caitlin, her nephew Brian Jr., two women that she doesn't really know, but she recognized. And those women were Julie Nagel and Sarah Levinson. Higgins and Brian Albert were in the TV room, and Nicole, Jen's sister, was also at the house. Now, Jen does mention that the house has two entrances, one side entrance by the garage and a front entrance, and she used the front entrance to enter the home that night. Inside the house, she said that the mood was celebratory. No fighting, no arguing, just pure laughter. At some point, there was an inside family joke, and they were watching a video of It's Raining Men. So at some point, the prosecution started talking about which windows face the front of the house. Jen said that the kitchen window does face the front of the house, but that the blinds were closed at this particular time. But she did mention that the front door is glass and that she could see outside in front of the house, and that as she was inside, she was expecting Karen and John to just come through the front door any minute. That's when she looked through the glass on the front door and saw a dark-colored SUV outside that she assumed was Karen. Now, she does testify that she saw the car parked in 3 different spots, although she never actually saw the car move. So basically, she would look out the door, see the car, go back to chatting, go back and look. The car had moved. She would go back to chatting, go back to look. You get the picture. Jen described texting John like, "Are you here? Park behind me." Then eventually she looked outside and the SUV was gone. Jen figured that they had just decided not to go inside. Now, the 3 spots that she recalled seeing that SUV were straight out from the front door, then by the flagpole, and then a little more forward from that flagpole. So eventually, like I said, the SUV was gone. Jen testified that she stayed at her sister's house until approximately 1:30, 1:45-ish. She recalled that they all left in quick succession. First, Brian Higgins, then her and her husband left, and they took Julie and Sarah home. And Caitlin, her niece, was by the door waiting for her ride. As Jen and her group were leaving the house, the car was parked in the driveway. She recalled that it was a very cold night outside and that it was snowing. So she tucked her head in her coat and kind of shuffled towards the car. Matt drove, Jen McCabe was in the front passenger seat, and the 2 ladies were in the back seat. Jen indicated that at this point, once they got into the car, there was a joke because on the back seat, there was a loaf of bread and peanut butter. And everybody, or like at least the ladies, kind of like joked about this. Jen said that she was facing the women in the back as her husband drove off, heading right past the flagpole, and she didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. But again, she wasn't even looking towards the front of the house or that flagpole because she was turned around chatting with the two women. After dropping the two women off at their respective places, they went home. The McCabe's went home. Jen got ready for bed. She played on her phone, checking some of her kids' sport activities online, and then she went to sleep. At 4:53 a.m., her phone rang, and it was Kaylee, John's niece. Jen answered, and all she could hear was a woman in the background screaming. And that woman was Karen Reed. Eventually, Karen took the phone from Kaylee, and she was just screaming about how John didn't come home and how she left him at the waterfall. Karen was screaming so loudly that Matt McCabe heard Karen while he was sleeping next to his wife, Jen. Jen recalled that she was groggy when she got the call, but she went into mom mode, like, okay, we have to find John. Believing that John was left at the waterfall, Jen remembered that Chris Albert was at the waterfall when everyone left. So she called Chris Albert's wife, Julie, but Julie didn't answer. That's when Jen's husband reminded Jen that they had seen Karen's SUV outside of the Albert house earlier that night. And when he said that, Jen was like, oh, that's right. Jen then called Kaylee back because she didn't actually have Karen's phone number. And Karen was still in the background screaming like an absolute lunatic. But then Karen Reed got on the phone.
When she got on the phone, I had told her, Karen, I saw you guys outside of my sister's house. And then she told me she didn't remember being there. And then she went on to say, she started saying, could I have hit him? Did I hit him? And then she just was just all over the place, like screaming my name, screaming so many different things. She was hard to follow or understand.
When she was saying to you, did I hit him? Could have I hit him? Was that before or after you informed her that you had seen her out front of your sister's house?
It was after I told her that. She also informed me that she had cracked her taillight.
In that conversation, she told you that?
In one of the conversations I had with her in my bedroom, yes.
When you told her that you had seen her out front, and she had said that she didn't remember that night, was that before or after she was saying, did I hit him? Could have I hit him?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
When she was telling you about that she didn't remember that night, was that before or after you had told her about seeing her car?
When I said I saw her at Fairview, then her response was she didn't even remember going there.
Did she ever deny that she came to Mr. O'Keefe's house? I mean, to your sister's house?
No.
When she told you or said to you, did I hit him or could have I hit him or something like that, did you have any idea what she was talking about?
No, I didn't pay attention to it.
When she told you that she had cracked her taillight the night before, did that have any significance at that time to you?
No.
So in telling you these different things, did you ever piece them together at that time?
No.
What was your primary motivation at that point?
I just wanted to help her because she was hysterical. Kaylee was very upset, so I wanted to help her, and I wanted to find John.
After this call, Jen calls a man named Tom Beatty, and that is John's friend, and Jen just happens to wonder if maybe John stayed at Tom's house that night. But Tom doesn't answer. On the stand, Jen describes that at this point, she's just calling people. First, she calls Tom, then she calls her sister Nicole, then she calls Tom's daughter. Jen then decided that she was going to make coffee, and she told her husband that they had to go look for John. That's when Jen starts to hear screaming outside of her house window. And it turns out it's Karen Reed. She just straight showed up at Jen McCabe's house, and that was at roughly 5:25, 5:30 a.m. And she was screaming, and so Jen's husband was like, hey, you need to stop screaming. You're going to wake up my neighbors. Jen told her husband, listen, I have to go with Karen to look for John, even though Jen admitted on the stand that she wasn't really worried at that time. Now, Jen's husband is like, be careful. There's like all this snow. You really shouldn't be driving, but just go. When Jen got outside, she told Karen that she was going to drive because Karen was hysterical. And then as she was talking to Karen, that's when another car pulled up to Jen McCabe's house. And that was Carrie Roberts. Carrie Roberts pulled up kind of like blocking the driveway, and there was a plow coming in behind her, so she had to drive a little bit forward. At that point, Jen and Karen got into Karen's car. Jen got into the driver's seat and Karen Reed got into the passenger seat. And Carrie was still at all times in her own vehicle. However, Carrie and Karen were on the phone together, and the phone was on speakerphone. So Jen could hear everything that was being said during this phone call. Side note, Jen did not have a chance to look at the tail light at this point as everything's going on. Jen describes that in this scenario, Carrie took charge. Karen wanted to go to Fairview, but Carrie said no. She wanted to go look for John at his house since Karen hadn't actually looked there. So they caravanned over to Meadows, and if you recall, that's where John lived. So Jen pulled up Karen's car into the driveway and Carrie followed behind her. They entered the home through the garage. Jen thought it was weird because her and Carrie removed their shoes and Karen did not. Apparently, John would have thrown a giant fit about dragging snow through the house. So the women searched the house and not finding John, they decided to go to Fairview. Really, this was Karen's idea and they just went there to shut her the hell up. But on the way out of John's house, that's when Karen showed them the cracked taillight. All three women walked over to the taillight and they saw the missing piece. Jen recalled that as the three women were staring at the broken taillight, Carrie pointed to a piece of taillight that was sticking out and noted that someone could snag their coat.
When we were in the driveway at Meadows, Karen showed myself and Carrie Roberts the cracked taillight.
Did you or Miss Roberts get close to the taillight at that point?
Yes, we walked over and the taillight was missing pieces.
Did Miss Roberts have any comment about it?
Yes, Miss Roberts.
So she had a comment. Next question.
What was Miss Roberts' demeanor at that point?
She was frustrated with Karen, had said that, had said that Karen basically was telling her to shut up. You were so drunk, you could have hit anything last night. And then Carrie, I remember just thinking, all right, let's go. And I remember Carrie thinking, oh,
Well,
someone's
let me
going
not
to
ask
get...
you what Carrie-
Oh, sorry.
We don't want to think what somebody thought.
Okay.
I want to know what you heard and what you saw. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. At some point when you were looking at the taillight with missing pieces with the defendant and Miss Roberts, did you see Miss Roberts point anything out?
Yes.
Share that with us.
She pointed a piece that was sticking out and was concerned that someone was going to catch their coat or something on it.
And during that time when the defendant is showing you the taillight with missing pieces, was she saying anything about it?
No, I don't. Not that I can recall right now.
You mentioned at some point she was saying, did I or could I have hit him?
After this taillight incident, they all packed into Carrie's car. Carrie drove, Jen McCabe was in the passenger side, and Karen was in the back bouncing around, yelling and saying everything 3 times. Now, I do want to point out that Jen McCabe did make it a point to at least say twice during her testimony today that Karen was saying everything in 3s. Like whenever she said Jen, she would say Jen, Jen, Jen. And whenever she said Carrie, she would say Carrie, Carrie, Carrie. So it was just a point that she made during her testimony today. Now, Carrie was freaking out because of the driving conditions, and she even yelled at Karen to shut up and put her seatbelt on. Jen recalled that at one point, while Karen was in the back, beep-bopping around, like in the back seat, she was wondering out loud if John could be cheating on her, and even wondered if he could be with Bella's mom. Now, honestly, poor Bella's mom. At this point, I'm wondering, is Bella's mom watching this trial thinking, why do they keep talking about me? So Jen continues to give directions, and once they pull onto Fairview and cross the tree lines by the flagpole, Karen yells, "Stop! Let me out of here! Let me out of the car!" or something like that. And she's like kicking at the door. Carrie stops and lets Karen out and then looks at Jen and basically mentions that Karen is batshit crazy. At that point, Karen goes straight to an area and Carrie follows behind her. And Jen, she still doesn't see anything until she is right up to the mound of snow. And that's when she sees Carrie removing snow off of John's face. Karen is lifting her shirt and John's shirt and straddling him and basically laying on top of him, presumably to kind of warm up his body temperature. As Karen is doing this, Carrie is screaming to get off of John, and that's when Jen and Carrie made eye contact, and they knew that John was gone. They run back to the car to call 911 and get some blankets. Jen is the one who actually makes the call, while Carrie is telling her to get the blankets from the car. After the 911 call, Jen returns to where John is, and she starts to do chest compressions. Karen Reed is doing mouth-to-mouth at this point. And this was the scene that first responders walked into. And that, alternates, is where court left off today. Honest to goodness, it is so unfortunate to end testimony at this point. I mean, this is so high stress for me as like just watching it. I can't even imagine what the jurors are thinking. I am sure that they have lives to get back to, but man, this is a rough stop for the day. All right, tomorrow, day 7, court will pick up right here where first responders arrived to John, but this time in the eyes and from the mouth of Jen McCabe herself. Now, before you go, don't forget to follow The Alternate wherever you listen or watch podcasts. And if you are really enjoying our daily recaps, be sure to support the show by giving us a thumbs up or 5 stars.